Jose Cole-Gutierrez, for your wonderful listeners, community. It's a pleasure to be with you today to share a bit about my story, my journey to Stanford and beyond. And so I look forward to the conversation, and thank you for your leadership in having these dialogues so that all of the community members who listen and partake, hopefully there's something that touches them, can support them on their journey to the success they want for their lives. So look forward to the dialogue.
Awesome. Thank you. So Jose, I often ask my guests to take us back to when they were 16, 17, and I have the luxury of a lot of my other guests. I know them really well. I know their story. I don't know your story well. So what I'm going to ask of you is, why don't you tell us where you want to start, and let's take it from there.
I want to start in the great fields of Fresno, California, the Central Valley, the agricultural epicenter, where a question from my mama helped change my life. We were picking grapes. And if you've ever picked grapes, it's a taxing process to help lay them down to become raisins. My dad, my mom, and I was the oldest of 5. We'd go out in those hot summers to pick grapes, 16 cents a tray, 16 cents a tray, to try to make ends meet. And she asked me this question one day: "Mijo, do you want to pick grapes for the rest of your life or get an education?" And it was transformative because I knew instantaneously I never wanted to pick grapes for the rest of my life. "Mommy, I want to get an education." "Mijo, you can do it. Just work hard. I believe in you." And at that moment, those great fields opened up for me, new horizons. My mom is originally from Texas, McAllen, Texas. She was born in Rio Hondo, but they grew up in McAllen area. So we have those connections, those roots. My grandmother, a lot of tios and tias, and they would travel from Texas to Fresno for crops. They were like itinerant farmers. My dad's from Mexico, near Guadalajara, Jalisco, in Jalisco. And he came to this country in his teenage years, again, for that better life. And he traveled to Fresno, and I like to say they met in the fields of Fresno, picking crops. My dad didn't have a formal education other than what he learned in the Mexican military, the Army. And my mom went to 8th grade, given that itinerant farming lifestyle. They got married at a young age, and I was the oldest. And we grew up, while we were materially poor, we were rich in love and faith and hard work. And my folks, I like to say, fueron los primeros maestros. They were the first teachers. My dad went back to school to learn, he went to night school, not back, he went to night school to learn English. And then, studied to become a mechanic. But before getting to a place of being a mechanic, he irrigated the land, picked crops. We did gardening, anything he could to help support the family. And my mom raised our children. And she went back to school, and she got her GED. And so there were powerful lessons about the fact that education was transformative in my life, and my parents were examples of that in that fight. And while they couldn't help me with my math work or my essays, in terms of the content necessarily, they always had that hand on the back, that pat on the back, that "Mijo, you can do it." And I would always go back to that question early on in those grape fields of, I don't want to pick grapes for the rest of my life. Another key part of my story is Mrs. Riddle in 2nd grade, who didn't just see a poor Mexican boy who always got in trouble. She saw someone who was bored. She said, "This boy's bored. He needs to be challenged." Mm-hmm. And, was tested for a gate and opened up new opportunities for me to get new, better educational opportunity. And then in high school, a parent of one of my friends who said, "Have you ever thought about Stanford?"
Wow.
I certainly hadn't, and if it wasn't for Mrs. Kong, I wouldn't have applied to Stanford, wouldn't have even known about it. And the only thing I thought was, "Isn't that an expensive place?" You know? And she said, "Well, I think you can do it." And on a whim, I said, "Okay." I applied to other, you know, University of California schools, and then let me try this place out. And thankfully, given all the great support from my parents and so many folks, was able to earn acceptance there and essentially a full ride. The first on both sides of my family to go to college. And then from there, my siblings went on. And so, you know, one key message, Dr. Saldivar, is those questions, those moments in our lives, those important people. We may not know it, but they change our lives. And um, you know, I think it's so important for community members to take those moments, to be there for our youth at all stages of their lives, to see beyond what may be at face value, and really you know, open up new horizons for them. And that's what helped transform my life to get to a place of Stanford.
I thank you for sharing that. And you know, it's when I have the podcast and I hear people's stories, and it's so beautiful and amazing, because I think for a lot of us, for a lot of the guests, there's so many parallels. And whether it's that teacher, right, that took the time to identify us and say, hey, you can do more, have you thought about, right? Or just somebody that mentored us. What I think struck me most in your story was um, your mom, and your mom asking you if you wanted to pick grapes. When I was in fifth grade, so my father, my father was he owns an auto body shop, self-employed, and he grew up as a migrant farm worker, and he tells me about picking grapes up in California.
Mm.
Namaste, he ate more than he picked, so he cost the family more money. But that's beside the point. So I'm in fifth grade, and he wakes me up one morning, first day of summer, and he says, "You're gonna come work with me." And okay, right? I'd never been out there to the shop. And about midday, it's hot, in South Texas heat. And he comes over and he says, I'm making you do this because I want you to see that you have a choice. You have options. You can do work like this, or you can go and get educated.
Mm-hmm.
And that set me straight. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that parallel, right? Because our parents know best, right? And our parents know, they see it in us. They can see that we can do better, that we, and so I appreciate that. Now, Jose, you know, going to Stanford, I mean, what was that transition like? First generation kid into college, and not, I mean, for any first generation kid, whether it's community college, state university, it's always a big jump. It's always a big transition. But I mean, you're talking about Stanford. What was that like for you?
You know, it's a great question. You know, I want to hit some kind of broader things and then some practical pieces for our listeners. You know, I think I remember growing up, and you may relate to this also, given, you know, our upbringing. I did feel like had to grow up fast, right? You have to get that maturity level, responsabilidad, respeto,
Hmm.
you know, from work, being the oldest, and, you know, and trying to make it happen. And so because of that, I felt my parents always said kind of, you know, you seem ready for that next step, though I felt I wasn't ready when I was going through the process. I'll tell you.
Hmm.
And now, as our oldest has just finished applying, I'll come back to that later. That I was like, wow, navigating this process It is so important to get the help. And I remember my counselor helping me out, and other friends like Mrs. Kong and their children who've been through it. It is important for that support. But I felt in terms of, I had gone through a lot of pain in my life. I'd seen those struggles. I think maturity wise was ready, but struggled in terms of some of those formal practices applying. And then, Stanford, a big place, easy to could get lost in a school. Building that network was important. I remember that drive in the gray Ford Aerostar van with my folks packed up, going through Palm Drive, seeing the mosaics of Mem Chu Memorial Church, greeting you. And my parents being like, wow, it was powerful. And I think their pride, their love and support helped ease that transition. But I also want to give another practical piece of advice in addition to the help. I remember my financial aid package came for Stanford, and we misread it at first, and almost said no because we thought that it was going to cost so much more than what was actually reflected. It was basically a full ride. But we just didn't know enough. We misread some pieces, the numbers, and then, it's a big decision. So, and our folks, we didn't make that much. So it's like, how is this going to work? So important. If there are any questions that especially financial aid, ask those questions, get that help. So that way there are no unintended mistakes in reading, especially nowadays. Many schools are offering significant financial aid packages, especially for our families in greatest need. So that's one piece of advice. Another one is, and I'll never forget this, and may she rest in peace, my freshman advisor, Ana Marie Porras. I'm not sure if you remember her. If
I
she was
do.
there during that time of admissions.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she passed too early to cancer. But she was my advisor, and I remember a good buddy of mine, we had a meeting at 9 a.m. with her. She would make those contacts, hey, build a relationship, kind of see if everything's going okay.
Yeah.
And we were about 15 minutes late. She sat us down and gave us a talking to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's like, this is unacceptable. You have earned this privilege, but you have to own up to it. You have to step up to the plate.
Yeah.
And I really, I reflected on that. And to this day, I remember the room. I remember how she looked. It was with love, but tough love.
Yeah.
And it helped me set me straight, get my head right. We're not playing games here. And it also showed a lot of folks are invested in your success. You need to be invested in your success. And yes, it may seem 15 minutes, you're running behind. First meeting, not acceptable. She didn't go easy on us, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And another example of importance of great people along the way to help you on that journey towards success, however you define it.
Yeah. So I love that. I appreciate that. I remember the first person I think I reached out to at Stanford upon receiving my acceptance letter was Anna Marie. And I remember we had one computer in my high school that had internet. So there I am at that one computer and emailing her and just trying to make sure it sounds good. And she was a godsend. Yeah, she helped me out tremendously as well. So Jose, you make it to the farm, you're trying to navigate, taking advantage of having these people there to support you. What is it that you wanted to study?
Well, I went in with the thought of being an English major. It's like, I love literature, and I was like, I love good grub too, Tocayo. And so it's like a buffet, and so, oh man, that was awesome. Oh, psychology was interesting. Sociology, political science. I'm serious. I felt like I'm gonna go for the tacos, the menudo, the tamales, and everything. And you know what? It was intro to Chicano life and culture. Professor Ramon Saldivar and Professor Luis Fraga.
Wow.
And they opened up my world to my history in a way that I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
And as I'm a history major, I became a history major, but was so committed still to education. Stanford had and it still does have an honors program with the Graduate School of Education. So I did history with a focus on U.S. history, 20th century kind of race and ethnicity, and then an honors program in education. Was able to study with some of the great professors at the ed school, did a thesis, which I loved, about the Mexican American quest for educational equity after the Brown v. Board case. And just had a great time learning. Dr. Al Camarillo was my mentor in history, and then Professor David Tyak in the School of Education. Stanford, and every university, right, has so many resources, but research was one. And at one point, Dr. Saldivar, I was actually on a PhD track. That was my goal.
Yeah.
Had summer programs, and Dr. Camarillo was guiding. But he also gave me some advice at one point. He said, some folks go straight through PhD, and that's a great path. You might also reflect on, do you want to go get a master's, maybe take some time, do some work, and then maybe come back, et cetera. And so I reflected on that, ended up after the farm, did apply to master's programs in education, including Stanford and other schools. Ended up, I was going to stay at Stanford, but I said, get some different experience. So went back east, went to Harvard for my master's in education, which was a blessing because I met my now beautiful wife out there of now going on 20 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. She was studying for her master's in public policy at the Kennedy School at Harvard, and I was studying the ed policy. And we met one night on January 22nd, 1999, dancing at the Roxy in Boston. Salsa, merengue, and the rest is history.
I love that. I love that.
Now 7 children, ages 5 to 17, with our oldest, as I mentioned earlier, just finished applying to colleges, including to the farm.
Wow. Well, congratulations. Congratulations on everything. Jose, it's funny. The more I hear your story, there's so many similarities. Like you,
Great.
so I'll often go to middle schools and elementaries for like career day, and that, I don't know how many elementary kids are thinking about they want to be a professor or anything like that, right? But I always tell them, with your education, treat it, and I always ask them, how many of you like buffets? And I use the same analogy. All the kids get excited. And I always tell them, I said, treat your education like a buffet.
There you go.
Eat it all up. Just take it all in. Have a little bit of this and have a little bit of that and a little bit of this. When I went to Stanford, I thought I was going to do business. And then I realized it just was not consistent with me. I took a bunch of different classes and settled on Chicano studies. So I did Chicano studies and I did the honors in education.
All right, there you go.
So
awesome.
Did the honors in education. Yeah. And just, was able to take, a couple courses with Dr. Camarillo and Fraga and just, I think, there's so many similarities about our paths. But you decided you're going to get a master's, you go east. And then what's next? What's next for Jose?
So even before I went back east, I had some good buddies from Stanford. They're in Southern California. And I thought, okay, I'll go back east and then get that experience, a different culture. Wasn't expecting the best Mexican food, the warmest weather, but really, and see what Harvard was about, and then come back to, connect with my friends and network. And then my now wife had a network, because she was from Southern California. So it's awesome. We're both from California, met out there, came back. I was already planning to come to Southern California. And it was relationships, Jose, and that's so important, right? For our youth, our college students, relationships. She took me to a meeting one morning of local leaders, just community members that got together. She said, There's always an open forum. You meet folks. And on the spot, there was the dean of a community college. He said he wanted to meet with me and hired me on the spot to teach ethnic studies. And right there, the journey began. Teaching a course, I connected with Dr. Camarillo. Here's my syllabus. I was so excited, and thought, hey, I get to kind of scratch the, kind of have more of that buffet, the teaching buffet.
Yeah.
But needed to develop a more full-time position because I was adjunct. That's a hustle. It was great. But then connected with more folks, and then went to a place called Puente Learning Center, which is a nonprofit education institution in Boyle Heights. And I saw the faces of my parents there. They teach children, youth, and adults. They teach English as a second language, a GED preparation. And I was a teacher and an administrator there and helped students. I remember students coming, immigrants, didn't speak English, and helping them, the principiante, all the way up to get to their to finish their ESL program, go to their high school diploma program, etc. And it was like seeing my parents there, and so being of service there was amazing. And then from there was learned about other opportunities in public education. We developed a charter kindergarten, a charter school kindergarten,
Wow.
which was allowed under the law. And I learned more about that. And then good friends. A good buddy of mine from Stanford, he had been recruiting me to go work for maybe a board member for LA Unified. It wasn't the right time, but I ended up going to another organization and working one that works with charter schools, and learned about that and how parents were engaging other choices. And there's always those debates about charter schools, traditional schools. That wasn't my focus. It's about how do we make sure every child has a great education, a public education. If they chose private, that's a different path. Did that for a little bit, and then was asked to lead the charter schools division for Los Angeles Unified School District. And there we oversee all of the charter schools that the district authorizes right now, 280 charter schools that we oversee.
Wow.
To ensure that they're meeting the terms of their charter, educating students well, and honoring the public trust with the public dollar. But all that to say also, did I plan it that way? Like you said, that buffet? No.
Yeah.
But I want to say, remain open. I encourage, your listeners, remain open. That was something that was helpful for me. Yes, I had thoughts, my purpose, my passion. But I had opportunities come that I could evaluate and then assess, is that the right, do I agree with the mission, the purpose? Can I be of service? Can I learn and grow, work with a great team? And at each stage that helped. And so did I expect to be X amount of years at one place, then over here and over here? I didn't plan it out that way, but being open and then with great relationships that opened up those opportunities. I think it's so key. So I try not to have those artificial timelines. Yeah, you have goals, you have thoughts, but for me, am I doing good work? Am I still being challenged? Can I make a positive impact? And then, to me, working as part of a great team is always important. So I'm thankful for the path that's, been laid before me, and we'll see what the future holds. But I'll ask myself those same questions whenever, another right opportunity comes my way. How did you journey, from Stanford? Love to hear a little bit about your next steps, that brought you to where you at now.
I stayed after I finished. So I'm finishing up my undergrad, and every summer I'd done research. I'd come back home, and I'd figured out a way to have Stanford pay me to come home and do work in the community. So I did some work with a nonprofit. And then I thought, you know what, I love teaching. I really love teaching. And I was also doing substituting. I was substituting elementary kids, and I loved it. I really loved it. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to graduate. I'm going to be an elementary school teacher. And I was good with that. I thought I really enjoy it. It's fulfilling. And I got cold feet. I I freaked out, and I remember feeling like I don't know everything. And I remember,
Mm.
and of course, misguided. I remember being an elementary kid and thinking my elementary teacher knows everything. Whatever I ask, they know it, right? And I felt like, man, I don't know anything. So I got cold feet. I stayed at Stanford, did a co-terminal master's degree in education. And while I was working on the master's, one of my mentors, Dr. Francisco Ajardo, he invites me back home to a conference that he organizes. So I bring my advisor from College of Ed, Ray McDermott. I pull Ray
Uh-huh.
down with me, and we go to the conference, and I'm on this panel with the dean, the then dean of the College of Education here in South Texas, and she says, I like what you have to say, and like you, I want to hire you on the spot.
There you go.
so so and I didn't know what to say. Ray was very gracious, and always had good advice for me, and he said, take it. He said, you don't get an opportunity like that. So it was a full-time position. She said, when are you graduating? I said, I graduate in June. She said,
Wow.
as soon as you're done, come by my office, we'll get the paperwork started. And I told myself, because I didn't necessarily have a path. I didn't say, like, by this time I'm going to do this, but I remember taking the job and telling my parents, I'm going to do this for 3 years, and then I'm going to go back and get my PhD.
Mhm.
And then I'll, move on, right? Move on to something else. Uh, I've been at the university ever since.
Yeah.
And I still went back. I went in and got my PhD at UT Austin. And, but all while I was working,
Yeah.
and I just, I think, like you said, you saw your parents' faces in
Yes.
the folks down at Puente.
Yes.
I think for me, I saw me in a lot of my students, but I think more importantly, I saw a lot of the kids that I went to school with that nobody paid attention to.
Hmm.
And for me, that was it. I was sold. And I thought, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna, I really love doing this work. Yeah. And so I've been there. I've been there ever since, and have really worked with first year students, and have really helped to grow the program. So, yeah.
Well, congratulations on that service. I mean, it's obviously, a place that's also challenged you and allowed you to reach many, um, many individuals. So, I applaud those efforts.
Thank you.
Uh, and I think that, that's a learning that I've had is, um, being in service to community, whether it's at in a university, school district, wherever we are, we can take that approach of service that, it's very life-giving.
Yeah.
It's life-giving. We make those connections like you just shared to your own upbringing, your own, you know, friends you saw. And I oftentimes would wonder too, going in when I was in high school, it was like almost a tale of two cities. You had kind of the regular program, you had a specialized program, and you wonder, why doesn't everybody get the best education? Why doesn't
Yeah.
everybody get a specialized program? And I'm not just talking thematic, that's different. I'm
Yeah.
talking about the high expectations,
Yeah.
you know. And I think for all of our students, um, that you know, I oftentimes think about what people thought of my dad at a certain point in his life as an
Mhm.
immigrant, and for our students, what do people see in them? Are they just static people? Oh, that's who you are and that's what you're going to be. No, that's not. I mean, I think our stories show we are very much a dynamic people,
Mhm.
and we grow. We have a limited potential like everybody else does. And with right supports and guidance, we can climb those mountains and reach new heights. And I just encourage, in terms of this podcast and the message, the path to college, the way to college. There are multiple paths. There are multiple ways. And, you know, for students that are working hard, you know, in your classes or your university or in any university who might be listening, that hard work, that perseverance, there is a cost to get an education. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about the work it takes to learn, and also to break those assumptions that folks may have, you know, and you know, encourage students to, hey, if you're feeling a certain way, be honest with those feelings, and reach out to someone, you know, for supports on those campuses. You know, a lot of universities, there's more being provided in terms of mental health, other support services, academic counseling, as well as research opportunities like you shared. So much in that buffet. And it's just so important for students to know that they're not alone, that there are resources and support. I remember my freshman year, you know, you kind of you reach those points. You talked about the transition. Well, there are different periods in those transitions. From the start, you kind of had that early honeymoon of, man, in the big campus or whatever, all
Yeah.
that is adjusting to social life. And then the academics really kick in. And I remember one night I was feeling overwhelmed with a lot of different things, you know, and then you feel a little homesick at some points, and then the load of the academics.
Mm-hmm.
I remember calling my brother and just needed to cry, needed to let it out. And you know what? And all I needed was that listening ear. Again,
Yeah.
you can do it, you know, that support. And then you have other friends on campus. And so, you know, I say that to say, hey, there's going to be that pain in the process. But there are a lot of good folks that want you to succeed,
Yeah.
that want to be there for you. And so all we need to do is reach out. And sometimes if we don't reach out, they'll reach out to us and say, hey, are you okay?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's so important. So I applaud you for the work you're doing to make those connections and provide those supports to students.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. You know, I often spend a lot of time at the beginning of the semester and with my students, and actually anybody that'll listen, and just encourage them to make those connections, to use the resources, to really get the most out of it, and to also don't feel like you have to struggle alone. You know, we didn't. You know, I'm an only child, but I remember calling my father crying, thinking, you know, I just failed my first midterm, and just needed that reassurance, just needed somebody to say that they believed in me, because at
Yeah,
that moment I didn't believe in myself.
yeah,
And yeah, so I remember that. I remember feeling like that. And so, you know, I encourage my students, you know, use the resources, reach out, and you don't have to do this alone. You're not alone in this. And so, yeah, so I appreciate that. You know, so you talked about your family, and you said your daughter, you just finished that, you know, applying to college. What was that like for you to be on this side of that, to be at least in this position right now? You're the parent who's guiding their child. What was that like for you?
so many wonderful emotions, Jose. I'll tell you, so many wonderful emotions. I mean, one that starts out, first of all, gratitude, right? You think back to all the sacrifices and to be in a position to be a better support to your children. You know, that's what our parents oftentimes said, those choices, those opportunities for our future generations. And, you know, so many of our ancestors, right, that, you know, did that work to help us, right? And so one was of gratitude to be in that. The other one too is just a realization of the power of the unique voice in each child, in each student. You know, I'm a big believer in sharing one's voice. You know, first identifying it, letting it
Mhm.
grow, develop. And as I'm sure you've learned in your work with students, and especially in those applications, It's that voice. Everybody has to do the transcript. You're going to look at the academics, the extracurriculars. Those are all very important. The tests, and that even the tests now are being looked at differently. But the voice, the personal statements, those questions, I encourage all students to really take time to get to the deeper layers of your voice when you share those answers. So I think inspiration was another emotion in seeing our daughter, our oldest Paloma, share her voice, her reflections, the way she phrased things, the points that she wanted to elevate. That was powerful, man. I mean, you think of the journey as a parent. Wow. That was beautiful. I think another one practically is, wow, how much things have changed.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that the whole financial process, my wife and I think, wow, is this how it was when we grew up? And obviously things change. The FAFSA, it's pretty straightforward. But then there's some other pieces. If you apply to private schools, well, they go deep in some of those questions. Again, this is not for discouragement, but it is to prepare. But we thought about it. Hey, you know what? The more information they have, the more they can be helpful. To really try to understand your context. But that was another piece of, make sure you get some time for it. So, during the holiday break for the private schools, we're burning the midnight oil, taking care of those pieces. So, those are some of the emotions, and seeing her go through that was powerful. And then for the younger siblings to see that, I think is also powerful. So, she applied to some UCs and Stanford, and then some schools back east, and so we'll see where the good Lord has planned for her. But it's already been an imprint in our lives, and we'll have 6 more children to go through the process.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I wish her the best, and I'm sure she's gonna end up in wherever she ends up. It's gonna be an amazing school, and I'm sure she's gonna do really well.
Thank you.
Jose, I know you've got your family to get to, and those are my dogs. If you can, my barking dogs. But I wanted to ask, as we transition out, what pieces of advice, or what advice would you give for either the new student or the parent of the new to be student? What advice would you give us?
Thank you for that question. Let me start first with the parents. And thank you for your role as first teachers, primeros maestros of your children. That pat on the back, that high expectation, that hard work, all those have an impact. You may not always see it sometimes. I remember growing up, I wonder what my parents were thinking when I did something. But in the long run, it makes a big difference. And I think in both of our stories, we see how those words of our parents, they stay etched in our hearts. So, I encourage them to remain in there and provide that support as best they can. And where there are challenging circumstances for families, that it's the entire family, that can provide support. I know that those words from tias, tíos, abuelitos, cousins, everybody, it makes a difference. So I would just encourage that. Also asking questions for parents. My mom, she would get on that horn. What's going on? She was involved, asking questions, asked me questions. So I knew, hey, she may not get into all those details, but I know she's on it. So I think that engagement is important. And again, I know there are different family situations, but one simple question conveys a message of, I want to know that you're on top of things, right? And then unconditional support is important for, children need to, sometimes they'll fall down, get back up. One of my favorite quotes is a Chinese proverb: fall down 7 times, get up 8. And so that's part of the process and learning from that. And lastly, for parents, there are so many, but I'll end with this one. For parents is, there are various resources. supports in terms of, local colleges, your high schools, college board, et cetera, where folks can be of support where you don't have to pay to have some of your questions answered. A lot of schools now are doing virtual tours given COVID, but also I think it's going to be something into the future. Virtual tours, more accessibility to help students really get to know their campuses and to ask questions about their programs, financial aid, et cetera. So I would encourage those. For the students, dream big, follow your heart. What is your passion? You may know it or you're unfolding it, but never let anyone extinguish your passion and the purpose you find for yourself. If that were the case, neither of us would have, gotten the opportunities we've gotten. And again, thanks for the support for so many people. But it does, you do have an important voice, and please cherish that. It may not be the direction everybody else wants you to go. And I know sometimes there are those conversations, but, I think a key to a fulfilled life is a happy and whole heart and one filled with your purpose and passion. What excites you. And if you haven't found that yet, that's okay. It's in development. Maybe explore, like we talked about earlier, that buffet. What's something new you may want to look at? Something you don't expect may have that change effect. The class you didn't think, oh, I don't know about this. Well, maybe there's something that'll spark an interest there. I would also add to that, welcome divergent perspectives. It's easy to go around and everybody agrees with you. What's that perspective that may be a difference of opinion that may get you thinking a different way? I think especially in today's society, we need to listen to divergent thoughts, diversity of thinking to help us refine our own thinking. And then either we stand firm, we still reiterate what we think, or we have a different perspective. So I think that's important. And never shy away from asking for help, whether it's to your college application, a college course, you're struggling, go to office hours, find a way to get the help you need. If you're at a high school, university, teachers, professors, university staff, high school staff, they're there to be of support to you. Yes, there may be a lot of students, but keep knocking on that door. Make yourself, known in terms of, I'm hungry to get the most out of this. I think is important. And never underestimate the power of your friendships, positively and sometimes not so positively. I do encourage students, and I learned this, as the old adage says, dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres, right? Tell me with whom you walk and I'll tell you who you are. Your relationships, you invest a lot of time and energy in them. Foster relationships that are also life-affirming, life-giving for you. And only what meets that measure for yourself. And I think that's important, because with great friends, we can get through a lot. And on a personal note too, find your spiritual place, wherever that may be. Give your spirit some nourishment as well. However that makes sense for you. But that was important for me. And, I think it's important for everybody to feed their inner self in a way that makes sense for them. So it's been a pleasure talking with you. I'm happy to continue to be of support as you do your work for your students. Again, not only because we're hermanos and we're in education, I have a connection to Texas with my family, and want all students to have that opportunity, as you and I both had. So thank you so much for the invitation and honor of being with you tonight.
Jose, thank you. I thank you for your story. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure it's going to resonate with a lot of our listeners, and I know it resonated with me on a number of levels. I appreciate the advice for our students and for our parents. because I know we can all use it. We can all use that little bit more information. So Jose, thank you again. This concludes another episode of the Way to College podcast. I'm Dr. Jose Saldiva, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.